My name is Ray Dempsey. I've had the privilege of working with the Dial team, not for all of the 5 years of this global index. I can only claim 4. I got here as soon as I could. I work now in my semi-retirement life as a special advisor for Layla and the Dial team. They're remarkable in not just the information, the insights, but the capacity to convene, to bring together groups just like this one. I'm so glad you're all here today. You know, in the previous panel, I heard Carlos say that we can't use the D word, we can't use the E word, but we can still talk about inclusion. He's right. I think there's another word that I'm hearing more and more in the context of the work that shapes this space and stretches into social impact, and that is culture. So we get a chance to spend some time now in this next conversation exploring some ideas and themes around the things that we do to shape culture. It's at the core. It certainly is still critical to driving talent and enabling opportunities for social impact. We'll think a little bit about the S in ESG, that social dimension, the way we build cultures that support meaningful impact, and reshaping approaches to talent that range from attraction to retention to engagement, all ideas that we've talked about already today. We'll spend a few minutes, I hope, thinking about unpacking some dynamics around corporate decision making. How do we decide what to do, how to do it, and how we manage to deal with the shifting stakeholder expectations, the redefinition ongoing of the way we lead. So an extraordinary panel that I have the privilege of harassing for the next 45 minutes. Before we jump into the questions and themes, I will give you a chance to get to know a little bit about each of these people. At the far end from me is Sandy Gould. Sandy is the Chief People Officer at GLAD. Sandy, I know GLAD used to be an acronym, and now it's not really an acronym, it's just the name. We're glad you're here. Please give us a brief introduction to what the organization that you represent.
Thank you so much. And yes, it is occupational for me to know that everyone will say GLAD when they talk to me. It's a positive word, so I take it as a good thing. Keeps me in high spirits every day. So yes, I'm at GLAD. It used to be the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. Eventually it shifted as all the different chapters across the country came together just to be known as GLAD. And really what we do is we are an advocacy, education, training, and media consulting organization. We are focused on transforming culture to a level of greater acceptance and equality. That's what GLAD does. And so it became less about defamation and more about the LGBTQ community, and that community as a reflection of all communities that are diverse, that deserve inclusion and equality, and that need to be elevated. And so that's the work we do at GLAD. I consider it the mission of my lifetime. I've had many great missions across the commercial and corporate sector. I think this is the one that is most important, inspiring, and I knew as I was stepping into the job, because I joined about a year and a few months ago, I knew, as did GLAD, what was coming. GLAD has become very good at predicting the future. And I think as we all recognize, and it's being talked about a lot here today, and it's the important work that Layla, Karen, and their team do, we all recognize that the road to equality is a ever-winding road. We make progress, we get pushed back. We make progress, we get pushed back. I think you all know where we are right now. And so that is when we do the most defining, most important work with all the different words we decide to use, right? To make sure that equality from individuals and from the collective continue to climb, and that we're always focused on getting to unity through division, which I think is always possible.
That's great, thanks Sandy. I have to admit to you that Sandy and I were chatting just before the session began, and I admitted to him that I almost wore that suit. I had it out, and I was
We decided that would be tacky.
You can't show up with 2 people on the same. Next to Sandy is Adrian Smith. Adrian's the SVP and Senior Partner and Chief Inclusion and Impact Officer Fleischman Hillard. You know, Adrian, I saw something on the Fleischman Hillard website that I loved. It described a company where who you think you are aligns to who people think you are, and it's supported by lived experiences. I really love that idea. This is not your grandfather's PR that Fleischman Hillard is doing today. We're glad you're here. Please share with us a bit more of what brings you into this conversation.
Well, I love that you started with that quote on the Fleischman Hillard site, and even saying that it's not your grandfather's PR firm, when in reality it is, over 70 years old, a Midwest company, and it's still very much, although it is a global company, still has that Midwest feel. So some people who don't really know us would say, Fleischman Hillard is so nice. We're such a nice company. But it has that Midwest sensibilities. And when I joined the organization 4 years ago, our mission was to become the most inclusive agency in the world. And that was one of the exciting things that drew me to that organization. Because that's sort of like my life's journey, is to be a part of that space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And since everything has happened, we've definitely evolved into less about the bold statement and more about the action, and how do we embed that into the community and culture, and even how we talk to our clients. Fleischman Hillard had a business component of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is now inclusion and impact. But we actually had a practice that we talk a lot about. How do you connect DEI to the business? Well, we had a business practice. We have a business practice. Everything that ranges from inclusive language to executive visibility and determining, which would be really huge right now for organizations who want to know how much am I out there talking about DEI in this world. We had a tool that could track, and figure out how should you shift your narrative if that's what you found to be necessary. So I wanted to be a part of an organization that had that mindset and that knew how to effectively communicate and storytell around all the work we do, and then particularly about inclusion and impact. This is also a part of my passion work, right? I have a day job as an inclusion and impact leader, but I also do this as my passion work. I have a nonprofit that I started in 2017, 2018 called the CAN Diversity Collective, and it's all about providing access and opportunity to young people and just people in general to spaces and places that you traditionally don't have. So I launched a program in Cannes during the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity. We call it Inkwell Beach after the Martha's Vineyard, Inkwell Beach. And then what we also do thought leadership in Davos during the World Economic Forum, what we call, we changed the name of Snow Beach to Inkwell Beach. But it's all about the power of inclusion, moving the conversation from the woe is me of DEI to the wow is me. Like, what are the real benefits of the work and how does it amplify just the everyday culture and community of an organization?
Well, that's great. Already some great pearls, and we haven't even gotten to the real questions yet. So hold on. Next to Adrian is Umran Benda. Umran, you are a partner. You are a partner in Search and Advisory with August Leadership. And I'm recalling when you and I got to spend time in DC, I guess sometime last year, I learned a bit about that August Leadership Collective. It's an extraordinary group of people with deep experience and ideas around this broad theme of leadership. I can only imagine what it's like when you all get together and you talk about the challenges we are facing in the world today.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks to Leila and Dive Global. It's a pleasure to be here. After 35 years of corporate career and 25 years with PepsiCo, and my last role was the Global Diversity and Engagement Officer. I moved into my second career and I joined August Leadership, which is a platform for executive search, leadership advisory, and also diversity advisory, which we now say inclusion and culture advisory. But I also sit in a couple of boards, public boards, so today's conversation, I really want to bring the social impact and inclusion from a board perspective, as well as from a CEO's perspective and management. So I worked globally in Turkey, Turkey, Hong Kong, Dubai, and US. So a lot of global experiences behind my diversity and inclusion, I should say. And I really want to capture, how we are trying to find those leaders with the global skills and global representation in this, ages difficult talent market. We need to address those needs for our clients. And that's the skills, that's the representation of different experiences, I think. So that's what I will talk about.
That's great. I'm looking forward to hearing more. And so next to him, Ron, is James Hunt Davis. Now that says Davis. Of course, it's
They've got the E.
Okay, so it's Davies. We got it right. James is Vice President in HR for Jaguar Land Rover North America. James, we're glad you're here. I have to tell you, I spent last weekend with a friend down in Houston playing golf. And every day we load up our clubs into a brand new Range Rover. I've never been in a car that smelled as good. Yeah, brand new Range Rover. I don't know what you do. I'm sure you're responsible for it. But it was remarkable.
Well, thank you for being here. Our company culture is you introduce yourself as a person first. Well, let me do that. So, James Hunt Davis, you will notice from my accent, I'm not from America, but I'm very proud to be here in America. I came here 7 years ago. I was very fortunate. My company sent me here for 3 years, and I loved it so much I stayed. So, a beautiful family. I'm proud to have a husband who I've been with for 21 years. Don't judge my age. And then proud to have two wonderful children. My son is 13 and my daughter is 8, and I couldn't be prouder to be bringing them up at the moment. Yes, despite all the chaos, but we're very proud to be a diverse family. So a bit about the work that I do. So I came again 7 years ago. I had a global role at JLR. Was very fortunate, very similar to you. I've seen some global experiences for setting up teams in Brazil, China, India. Very fortunate to have those experiences under my belt, but never came to America as part of my job. So when this job came up, I was like, absolutely, let's give it a go. And I think I'm fascinated by culture. Every single day, the interactions, coaching leaders, how can we learn from one another and rather than judge one another?
That's terrific. You know who they are. Let's dive in. I'm going to go all the way back down, Sandy, and start with you. So yeah, get the good mic. So, especially in this environment, Sandy, we know that sometimes to really advance this work requires a bit of finesse. We've heard, some messages and ideas about that all through the afternoon so far. What do you think it means to finesse social impact in the business strategy and preserve that authenticity?
You're starting with the small questions.
Yes.
So I think it's interesting to think about human perception. And I think that's kind of where we have to start. So we're all individuals. We're also all collective. We want to be unique and different, but we also want to fit in. And now I've just summarized everything that's going on in the world, right? The struggle therein. I think as we think about your business strategy, the mission of your business, what you're trying to accomplish, the form of creativity you want to implement, the way you want to change the world, and the profit, if you're a commercial organization, that you want from that, or the profit, if you're a nonprofit, that you want from that, because it's probably a profit for good or good for all. They're different models, right? But everyone's after doing something positive. So if your business strategy has a specific goal, the first thing is that social impact or any kind of other program, anything you do, has to align to that strategy. It has to help advance that goal and in that particular way. So I think, many people on the panels before said this. I always believe we have to measure everything against whatever the business, its primary mission is, and if it's moving the needle, what else moves the needle? So social impact moves the needle for a whole number of reasons, from marketing to revenue, to profit, to distribution, to access, to influence. I mean, we can go on for a long time, right? So now let's talk about finesse. Finesse comes in when different parties or people are trying to navigate different systems of perception. So why have we been talking about changing words like diversity? Well, our goal is to have a certain kind of impact. It's to create inclusion, it's to create access, it's to create and drive equality. So in order to do that, as we think about different individuals and different communities or groups of organizations, they all have different systems of perception. And we want to influence, connect, engage to that different perception. That's what finesse is. Finesse is, what words would I use that would resonate with you? That would mean to you what it means to me, right? So I want to just point out that we always have to use finesse when two or more people are involved, anywhere, because every two humans have different worldviews, completely, utterly, right? And they'll never be the same. We may align and come really close together on a lot of things, but those systems of perception are still different. So finesse, before this era we're in now, in every other era of DE&I and everything else we've been doing, we had to use finesse. So that's one point, right? So one, I think, is you gotta be really clear, when we drive social impact, how does it advance our primary mission? The way our organization or community can make the world better through social impact, but towards our primary goal. I think that's really important. And I think it's important because people won't believe it if you don't actually own that. If you don't make sure it's clear, like, this is what we all came together to do, and here's why we care about social impact relative to that goal. So I think finesse is important, and I want to just balance it with authenticity. People know when you're not telling them exactly what's true. They know when you're not saying the thing. So finesse should never be confused with not saying the thing, right? If we're doing something, if we've changed a word to avoid scrutiny, to avoid losing customers, if we're changing a word because we're trying to get more people to relate and connect to it, we should just say that, right? And so I think finesse, people often say, like, well, if you use finesse, you're not being authentic. That's not finesse, that's something else, right? Finesse is, have I thought about broadening my lens in the language I'll use so that it doesn't just have meaning to me, but to all of you, and there's connection. So I think, one, measuring social impact against your core strategy and its value, its concrete value. And then two, this idea of what creates the most access and then allows us to keep doing the work that we believe returns the value. And I think those are the three filters I would hold up for social impact and finesse. But I really want to emphasize, especially in this time, and this is something we're all always learning every day, myself especially, you've got to just say the thing, what the thing really is, right? We've had a lot of people reaching out to us for consulting who say, how do we do this and not have our employees feel betrayed? And my response is, start with that. Start with your priority is getting them the support and the inclusion. And then whether you are loud and proud or careful, that depends. Sometimes you should be a bear, sometimes you should be a cat. That depends on the moment. But the goal's the important thing, right? Of course I say that and I'm wearing this, but still, it's all about timing, while still always being authentic. Does that make sense?
That does. That's so powerful. I love everything you framed there, Sandy. The idea of different worldviews. I sometimes see and hear and read about people who I think are on parallel universes. Maybe that's the same idea, but that balancing of the authenticity with the finesse required to make sure you're meeting people where they are is such a powerful message. James, I'm going to come all the way down here now, back to you, the other end. And I talked about you guys clearly are winning at creating the right smell in the vehicles. That is success. But let's talk about success defined in this idea of culture. How do you define success when it comes to embedding social impact into your business strategy, aligning and linking culture in town?
Yeah, so I'll probably relay an example that we've been on probably for the last 5 years, where we completely reinvented the company's purpose. So back in 2020 and 21, I was very privileged to be part of that early work defining what our company purpose would be. And for anyone, we've rebranded our company, it's called JLR now, rather than Jaguar Land Rover. And our company purpose is live the exceptional with soul. And it was a conversation starter, if nothing else, to a lot of our employees and working out what it really meant for them. But it was the start of something really special that we started to define what did our certain brands mean in the marketplace and who did we want to be. So you've heard of Range Rover, a great successful brand in America, that is still great, but a brand that isn't well known but is in other parts of the globe is Jaguar, or Jaguar, as it's known. If there's any hands up, has anyone seen the Jaguar new adverts that came out towards the end of last year? That got a lot of media attention, and if you want to Google it, please do. We thought that we would get about 2 or 3 million hits on that advert of relaunching that brand, and it attracted about 700 million. And we did that on purpose to be disruptive in the marketplace, where everyone else was leaning back against DEI and kind of shying away from it. We thought, actually, let's go the opposite direction. And I couldn't have been prouder for us to do that, actually. And it caught so much attention and lots of hate. Actually, on the negative side of things, some of our employees were targeted, which I had to work through, and that was very upsetting to see. But coming through all of that now, we've got the largest order bank waiting for that car. We've got very devoted customers waiting for that to come out. And I do think that's down to, over the years, us being defining who we want to be and targeting certain customers, and not being afraid that actually some customers it's not for them, and that's okay. And so, being in a company that kind of encouraged that, a brand which is very individualistic, very focused on certain targeting markets rather than everyone else, I think was very bold. And so that for me was a defining part around you don't always have to please everybody, and some of this work is about being bold and being out there.
Wow, that's terrific. James, we need more anecdotes like the one you shared. Sandy made the point that you've got to anchor this in the business value. I agree so much. And the largest order bank ever in this new launch is certainly, that sounds like business value to me. Adrian, let's go to you. I thought about that quote on your website that we've talked about already, and it certainly means that you can't operate on your own. There's a central theme of collaboration that enables people to shape both who they think they are and who the world thinks they are, and to ensure that there are experiences that underpin that. So for you, as we think about this idea of culture and social impact, what role does collaboration play, whether that's across sectors, across or within communities, or even just between functions in the organization? And what difference do they make in your opportunity to scale and create impact?
I would say that's a really interesting, powerful kind of question. I think right now in this particular time, it's really important because the reality is we need collaboration. No matter what it is you do, where you are, in your family, your job, you need to collaborate, right? Collaboration to me is like the very underpinning. It's the engine that makes all of your intentions, whatever you want to do, have impact. It is that one thing that makes sort of the work that you talked about finesse. Now there's this thing about, is it fight, flight, or finesse? What do you do, right? Sometimes my tendency is to fight, right? When you figure out these pushbacks on inclusion, it's like, oh, hell no, I'm fighting this. We have to be able to do what we want, say what we want. Where's freedom of speech? All of that. But the reality is finesse gets you what you want, right? And the idea of collaborating in such a way that you're collaborating with people who you might collaborate and partner with people that you may not even thought would be the best partner. But once you've had an opportunity to talk to someone and figure out what are their fundamental needs and what are their fundamental points and purpose and desires, you figure and learn that you have more in common than you don't, right? And creating that collaboration, creating that partnership allows you to grow and do things that you never thought you would be able to do. Like if you think about internal work of our comms team and our HR team, right? These worlds are so far apart, but the reality is the comms team only amplifies the work that the HR team does. Like if we storytell more about the exciting work of HR, did you know, like from the internal comms team, and grabs and creates an opportunity for just the energy and synergy around the work, I think that is important. If you think about creatives and corporations, the creatives help to amplify and again story tell about what's important to the brand. So creating this fundamental thing of collaboration, just talking, creating that story that gives you the ability to feel comfortable moving from diversity, equity, and inclusion to inclusion and impact. Because the bottom line is you understand what you're getting, what you want, in the final push. Because we know DEI, that pushback on it was really about race and gender. We understand that, right? We also understand that the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion was far beyond race and gender. It's all about helping and providing access and opportunities for people who may not have had that opportunity. I love to tell the story about the lower curved area on the sidewalk. Has everybody heard about that lower curved area, right? So that wasn't created for me, a Black woman, cisgender, fully able-bodied person. It was created for access with people who had disabilities. But not only do people with disabilities gain access now, women pushing baby carts, people pushing grocery carts, people who have, hurt knee, delivery people now have access. So this one lower curve law that was passed now benefits multiple people. And you can tell the same story with closed captions. More people without disabilities or hearing issues use closed captions. You in a bar and you're watching a game, you're looking at the screen, to see what's being said. So things that are created or systems that are created for the least of these actually benefit everyone. So just think about how we've collaborated and been able to connect these different communities that you may not have thought would benefit from it, but see the impact that it's had. So I would say the answer to the ultimate question is collaboration is really what takes the intention and give it the strongest impact and visibility possible.
It's terrific. I really love the compliment that you focused on there, Adrienne, about how the benefit usually is not just for a particular group, but it accrues really broadly. I'll admit, I get yelled at a lot on anything on Netflix. For some reason, I just can never understand what they said. So I'm always pushing that minus 10-second button, and it automatically turns on the captions. And then I know what's going on in the scene. That wasn't for me, but I use it. Ramon, we're going to come to you. You're at the end of the formal structure of the questions here, but August Leadership is a source of some of the greatest leadership talent in the world. We've talked about the shifting language, but maybe there's also something about shifting organizational structures. Where should social impact and inclusion, by whatever name, sit within organization to be the most effective and to ensure that it's not siloed?
Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, in August Leadership, we try to stay very close to the needs of the clients. And I will base this answer on my personal experiences as a public company board member in UK. And then previously the president of Asia Pacific for PepsiCo and also CHRO and Chief Diversity and Engagement Officer for PepsiCo. So I have seen it all in a way, I can say, in different years, different times. But at this point, our board in the UK, the company called Bacower, we have an ESG committee. So I'm the chair of the ESG committee, and our role is really to govern this whole ESG, but S is an important part, including our employees and also communities. And then in the company, the CEO is of course the leader of everything, has to set the tone, they have to, CEOs should set the tone for the culture, people agenda, and they are part of the ESG Council as a sponsor. ESG Council is the one in the company. So ESG Committee is the board, ESG Council is the management. So they have different functions represented in this council, starting from the CHRO, of course, CFO, operations, communications, and I will explain why. Because at the end of the day, we are supposed to have a strategy in line with the business strategy, talent strategy, and ESG strategy. So they should be all tied, which brings in the CEO, which brings in the CFO, and then the CPO or CHRO. And also, the management has to execute, which means that the operations team, they are so much into the environment and water piece and everything. On the social side, you will of course have the CHRO, but you need to have the internal communication, external communication, legal. So I don't know if any function is left out. I mean, they have to be all involved, and everything starts with the CEO setting the direction, setting the KPIs, and the management executing it, including all the functions and levels. Because if we are talking about, let's say, food waste, it has to be measured, and the people in the factories should be owning it. And if you look at the social, it's about engagement of the employees. It's the retention. For example, retention is a big deal in most organizations today, and we link it to the compensation of the leadership team. So in a way, if there is the ESG agenda, it's linked also to the compensation committee, remuneration committee, as well as nomination committee and audit and risk committee. So it all goes up to the board at different committee levels, but then comes down to the, I think, the executive team, starting with the CEO, including all functions, and then cascaded down the organization. But if you want to be very specific, I think we can say it should be part of definitely HR, in also the sustainability CSO, the sustainability officer, as well as, I like this new combination of inclusion and impact together, but it should not be siloed. And this should be managed by the CEO, governed by the board, and then the KPIs should be very straightforward, starting from the board down to the leadership levels. I mean, as deep as you can go. So that's how I would structure it. It works well in that regard. If you're a smaller organization, then I don't think you have all the complexities anyhow. In bigger organizations, you have these silos and complexities. As long as the CEO sets the right tone, I think the inclusion, the engagement, the communities, the retention KPIs, engagement KPIs, human rights KPIs, they will be all in order. And you should not be ashamed of publishing them. It's part of the reporting requirements anyhow. It's part of the risk, today's risk environment as well. It's part of the risk management audit committee. So, I mean, I see it very well working if it is governed by the board, you know, managed, let's say, or led by the CEO and managed by the executive team. So that's how it goes. And there should be authenticity, transparency in reporting and communication also that we talked about. So that will be my structural guidance.
That's terrific. I really appreciate that you frame that through the lens of a board director, because org design often probably isn't thinking about it from that direction, but it really does matter ultimately in the way that the metrics and the accountabilities are framed. I'll share this from a personal perspective. I served as a chief diversity officer in two companies, two great big giant companies. In one, I reported into the chairman and president of BP America. And at Barclays, I reported into the CHRO. My own reflection is that there may not be a right answer, but there is a difference. and the dynamics are absolutely different. Sometimes the things you got to push hardest on in driving this work, it affects the processes that are stewarded by HR. And sometimes that means you got to go to your siblings and poke them in the eyeballs. That's sometimes not easy to do. My own hope is that the reframing of DEI, because we now must, creates the opportunity to actually reconsider the organizational construct that ultimately relates to the governance and accountability expectations of the boards.
Can I also add something? If HR is very well established, recognized, and respected in the organization, it's a good place to land these functions or social impact and inclusion. But unfortunately, not every company has that kind of established CPO, CHRO type of roles. Therefore, we have to be careful about if it is, great. If not, then you need to have your CEO and CSO, sustainability officer. I think definitely they should chime in.
That's great. We're almost exactly at time, even with a little bit of a late start. So I don't know who I have to ask permission to take any more questions. Do we have time for one?
Yes, definitely.
All right, we do. Well, that hand went up really fast.
Yeah, we'll see for that. Thank you so much to the panel. Umran, a question for you, because despite some progress, most, at least public company boards, don't look like the world they serve. And that's just facts. And there are organizations that are trying to, on the outside, trying to say, put more women on boards, more people of color and so on. So how can you as a board member with your unique profile help the board understand things from a perspective that some of them just can't adopt, because they're not us, you know, they're not necessarily reflective of the world that they're trying to serve. So, thanks.
If you would, make sure everybody got the question. We didn't have a microphone there.
Oh, okay. I think it's more about the role of boards to represent the world we are serving, which is not the case today. In some countries, of course, there are good directions, goals, quotas, whatever you call it. I want to call them more targets and goals. And if you don't have them, unfortunately, there is always a reason of saying, oh, we don't have the right person, we don't have, you know, the diverse talent, which is not right, as we all know. So at this point, speaking from the UK perspective, you have to declare your numbers. And then you should have 40% women in the boards. I mean, our board is currently not at 40%, so we definitely get some remarks about that.
Public shaming.
Public shaming. I mean, we have three women in the board, and we are all chairs of different committees, you know. So we are in a good place, and I feel good about it. But because we have more male or men, you know, in the board, then the percentage goes down. So what you can say is in the next opportunity when we will have another board member recruitment, we will use the skills matrix and make sure, you know, we take care of all these, you know, representation goals, etc. And we know that countries like France, I mean, there are many examples from Europe. I think they're in very good places now in their, especially diversity and women in boards. So how it happens? It happens with goals. If you don't have goals, unfortunately, I mean, the goals can be, quota is the harsh word, but I like the idea of having a guidance and, as you say, publicly shaming in a way, but reminding that, you know, the direction, you know, here's the direction, you have to go there. So that's what we need. And as board members, we are reviewing our, of course, board representation, executive representation. We are also reviewing the compensation gaps gender-wise, and recently also trying to measure the different the different ethnicities. We can now do that in the UK just to make sure we ask people to declare based on their own will, of course, and then we can talk about the pay gap for ethnicity also. So it feels like I'm coming from another world here, just to give you some hope. I mean, I worked in the US, but at least there are still some countries making sure things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it's a great point. There are different government expectations in the UK and other places around the world. And so many global companies are struggling to balance, and we heard that discussed in an earlier panel. One more? One more. You jumped up and raised your hand so high.
Yeah, it's me again, caught the problem. So Denise again, so I want to kind of combine three of your responses quickly. So Ron, you talked about retention being a goal, right? People are actually, their performance is measured by that. But earlier we heard Sean talk about how engagement, even if you're retained, can be low, right? And then Adrian, you talked about the collaboration piece of it and how we heard from the example earlier of that Googleable company that came from the ELC was honored, how their change and making changes created considerable changes to their business in a positive way. But in certain cases, Iran, in the Americas, whatever, potentially that board doesn't look like this, they're not driving that from top down, but there's still a responsibility, those of us and those people who are in the organization, to create that change. So that's where I'm gonna come right over to you. We talk about that flight versus finesse, right? So earlier I had to talk a colleague down from leaving because the fear and the things that we're talking about, that she's a first generation Haitian American, so she's an immigrant background, she's a Black woman, and she studied ESG, got her master's in it. She feels like everything she's about, the whole world is against her with it. So when I talk, going back to the finessing piece of it, and I don't know if you've ever read the book The Medici Effect, but the conversation, there's one interesting conversation very quickly. OR doctors leverage NASCAR and pit crews to understand how to change their accident rates in the OR. They're two completely different types of organizations, but they collaborated to create that change. What are some things we can encourage employees from under the executive level to do to kind of drive that change in collaboration to create the mindset and the change for an opportunity mindset rather than just the fear?
So it's a great question. I'll start and then hand it to you, because I know you're gonna have pearls of wisdom and good phrasing too. So I am unbelievably obsessed with superpowers because it kind of saved my life as a kid. And so I always wear the uniform, I always show up with that. And one of the things I think about what we have seen change representation is when people understood the physics of it, the actual science of it. Even beneath, and I completely agree about like the targets and goals are so absolute because we must measure anything that we want to change, right? But when we think about representation, and the NASCAR example is such a beautiful example, the change, the diversity and the range of thought. So if I ask everyone in the room to stop for a moment and think about the last time you or anybody you knew solved a problem, what did you do? Because it turns out all 8 billion people on the planet did the same thing. There's one thing you all did the same, to solve a problem. You thought differently. That's what solved a problem, right? So OR surgeons using NASCAR, they recognize we have to think outside this system using thought from another system, which is influenced by experience, culture, lifestyle type, identity, religion. It goes on forever, right? Difference plus imagination equals innovation. That's why it matters to a business, to a nonprofit, to anybody. At a human level, creativity flows from that. So if we're talking about this Haitian woman you mentioned, I remember a time at Yahoo where a very tough time for the company, struggling, trying to figure out our direction. A lot of the teams were kind of depressed and sad, and people would come over to my team to talk to recruiting, and there'd be noise, people would be lively, excited, happy, having fun, playing games, just all sorts of things. And the managers would come up to me and they go, "What did you do? How are you the happy bubble in the whole company right now?" And I would say, "Look around. What do you see? You see a bunch of different cultures learning from each other, who also are comfortable speaking up because usually they are the one in the room, so they've had to speak up. So even right now when we are facing incredible challenges, they're speaking up. They're coming up with ideas. They're showing a different perspective on how to do something." And I said to the person, I said, "Why do you think I hired diverse across my team? Just look at what's happening. They're coming up with new ways to solve recruiting problems. Many of them didn't even come from recruiting, and that's why they were capable of coming up with a different idea." So just going back to the physics of different ways of thinking is the source of innovation. Difference plus imagination equals innovation. We are all in that game. And so that scenario is great for me because there's no question that Haitian woman has gone through so many unique and different and challenging experiences, and many others will not know the kinds of things she's been able to do, that what they look at as hard, she'll laugh at and say, oh, I've got 5 ways to solve that, right? That's the thing we have to keep. With all the different names it's called, ultimately that is at the source, and that's priceless, I think.
I think he actually said everything, but I would just drop your mic. But I would add hope to this narrative, right? It's just a very simple thing, and Christophe and I had a conversation at dinner about my own personal journey of my passion project and my day job are literally under attack. And so I'm just like, well, what the am I supposed to do, right? And even deeper than that, I did this, I'll tell that story, the African ancestry that traced my mitochondrial DNA back to Sierra Leone, to the Mende tribe, and within the Mende tribe, there's a secret society of women called Sandi, S-A-N-D-E, and their whole point and purpose was to usher in the next generation, right? To guide them through the rites of passage. So supposedly, the story that I was told that I bought into full effect, that those are the women that I come from. So I can't do anything about the DNA that's in me that is committed to the work of inclusion and impact, diversity, equity, and inclusion, helping to change and create access and opportunities for communities, which ultimately helps all of us in society. It just is that thing. So what I gather from that, in spite of everything that's around me, is finding opportunities to be around people with like minds, who think about there's an opportunity for change here. They're very optimistic, and being optimistic ain't easy. It's not for the weak, right? You just have to be really committed, 10 toes down. I was inspired last night at the dinner because the people believed in succession planning and helping and creating a world for the next, creating a world that's better for the next generation. So finding the nuggets of hope in anything, that collaboration piece is going to be key for her sanity, for her mental health, for her emotional health, for all of us, honestly, just to be able to do that. So hopefully that'll help her, and tell her to call me, we can talk.
Adrienne, pick up that broken mic and drop it. No, no, no.
I knew she would.
That was remarkable. We have to stop. We're over time. The summary is easy. You did a great job of it, actually, in the way you framed your question. But we looked at culture through the lenses of finesse and collaboration and courage and commitment and construct and accountability. And in all those ways, the way they link together to shape organizational culture and drive impact. I've learned a lot. Please help me thank this for